My dad tried to pay my boyfriend to leave me, and my mom let it happen. I never thought my life would unravel so quickly. One moment, I was planning a future with the man I loved, and the next, I was standing at the edge of a decision that would shatter everything I thought I knew. Looking back, the signs were always there. The disapproving glances, the forced smiles, the questions that dripped with judgment. But I ignored them. Love has a way of making you blind to the storm that's brewing just beyond the horizon. Ryan wasn't what my parents had envisioned for me. My father, Richard Whitmore, was the kind of man who measured worth in dollar signs and last names. My mother, Margaret, hid her disdain beneath a polished smile, her perfectly manicured nails tapping impatiently on whatever designer handbag she was carrying that day. To them, Ryan was a glaring misstep. A small-town boy from Ohio with oil-streaked, hands and a heart too genuine for their world of exclusive clubs and silent judgments. But to me, Ryan was everything. He saw me, really saw me, beyond the curated life I had been molded into. When I met him, I was still pretending to want the sleek downtown apartment, the high-profile corporate career, the designer brunches. But Ryan, he was different. He taught me how to find joy in the small things: morning coffee in a cracked mug, late-night walks along the riverfront, the warmth of a hand squeezing mine in the dead of winter. I should have known my parents would never accept him. They tolerated his presence at first, like one might tolerate a misplaced piece of furniture. "It's just a phase," my mother would say, half laughing over her glass of Merlot. "She'll grow out of it." My father rarely spoke of Ryan at all. When he did, it was with a level of dismissal that made my stomach twist. Then came the dinner. The night everything shifted. I remember it vividly. The long mahogany table, the flicker of candlelight casting shadows across the gleaming silverware. Ryan sat across from me, trying his best to engage in polite conversation. He spoke about his latest project at the repair shop, how he'd managed to restore a classic motorcycle that most people would have given up on. His eyes lit up when he talked about it, that boyish enthusiasm I'd fallen in love with shining through. But my father didn't care about motorcycles. He didn't care about the hours of dedication or the satisfaction of bringing something broken back to life. All he saw was grease under Ryan's nails and the absence of a tailored suit. "And what's your 5-year plan, Ryan?" my father had asked, his tone dripping with condescension. Ryan, bless him, answered with honesty. He talked about wanting to eventually open his own garage, to create a space where people like him could bring their beloved machines back to life. I watched as my father's expression hardened, the barely contained disappointment pulsing beneath his composed facade. I wanted to scream, to demand why loving someone for their kindness, their laughter, their unwavering belief in you wasn't enough. But I bit my tongue, because even then I wasn't ready to face the truth, that no matter what Ryan did, it would never be enough for them. The real blow came later. After the plates had been cleared and the wine glasses emptied, my father pulled me aside. "You're making a mistake, Emily," he said, his voice low but firm. "You think this is love, but it won't last. Men like Ryan don't stay when life gets difficult. He doesn't have the resources, the connections. One day, you'll see that I'm right." I didn't argue, not because I agreed, but because I knew it wouldn't matter. My father had already decided that Ryan was unworthy. Nothing I said could change that. But even then, I had no idea how far he'd be willing to go. It wasn't until days later when Ryan came home, his face pale and his hands trembling, that I learned the truth. My father had called him, invited him to coffee like it was some harmless fatherly gesture. But it wasn't. He offered me $10,000 to break up with. "You," Ryan said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Said I should take the money and disappear, and if I refused, he'd make it 15. The air left my lungs. I stared at him. waiting for him to tell me it was some sick joke. But the anguish in his eyes told me otherwise. My father hadn't just dismissed Ryan. He'd tried to buy him, like our love was a simple transaction. Told him no, Ryan continued, his jaw clenched. I told him I wasn't going anywhere. But I could see the pain in his eyes, the humiliation, the disbelief that someone could see him as nothing more than an obstacle to be removed. And yet, what hurt the most was the question that lingered unspoken. What if I had never found out? Would my father have smiled at me across the dinner table, pretending he hadn't just tried to destroy everything I held dear? Would my mother have poured another glass of wine, congratulating herself on a problem solved? The betrayal burned through me, but beneath it was something stronger. Determination. I wasn't going to let them win. They thought love could be bought, controlled, manipulated. But they were wrong. And soon, they were going to realize just how wrong they were when Ryan told me what my father had done. I could barely breathe. I sat there, my hands clenched so tightly that my nails dug into my palms. The words kept replaying in my head, $10,000, like some sick joke I couldn't escape. My father, Richard Whitmore, had tried to bribe the man I loved, and not just once. When Ryan refused, he upped the offer, as if our relationship was a business transaction he could close with the right number. I couldn't believe it at first. It wasn't like my father hadn't made his disapproval clear. He'd always been quick with his passive-aggressive remarks about Ryan's background, about how people from small towns have limited perspectives. But I thought, maybe foolishly, that it would stop there. I thought he'd eventually see what I saw. The unwavering kindness, the quiet strength, the way Ryan could make me laugh even on my worst days. I had hoped, naively, that my father's stubbornness would bend with time. But I was wrong. He hadn't tried to understand. He had tried to erase. Ryan's hands trembled when he told me about the meeting. My father had called him, requesting a man-to-man talk over coffee. The way Ryan described it, he'd actually been hopeful. Maybe, just maybe, my father was making an effort to get to know him. It's laughable, really. How could we have been so naive? Ryan showed up, dressed, in his best, with that earnest hope still lingering in his chest. And then, within minutes, it was shattered. He didn't waste time, Ryan said, his voice low. Barely 5 minutes of small talk, then he pulled out a check, slid it across the table like it was nothing. I could see it as he spoke. My father's cool, calculating demeanor. The gleaming surface of a marble-topped cafe table, the absurdity of a neatly signed check, as though it could reduce our relationship to a dollar amount. I told him no, Ryan continued, his jaw clenched. But he just smiled, said he could make it 15 if I reconsidered. Like I was a problem to be solved. My heart shattered all over again. I wasn't just furious, I was humiliated. My father hadn't simply insulted Ryan, he had insulted me. He believed I was incapable of making my own choices, that my love for Ryan was a mistake to be corrected. And the worst part? He had no remorse. He was so certain that money could buy compliance. Ryan kept talking, his voice thick with emotion. He said men like me never stick around, that it's only a matter of time before I leave you. He shook his head, blinking back the hurt that still lingered. As if loving you wasn't enough. As if I'm disposable. The shame that twisted inside me was unbearable. My father's arrogance wasn't just an attack on Ryan's character. It was a reflection of how little he thought of me. Did he truly believe I was so fragile, so incapable of understanding my own heart? The thought of him sitting there, checkbook in hand, so sure of his power, made my stomach turn. I should have walked out the moment he started, Ryan said softly. But I didn't. I wanted to make it clear. I told him I wasn't going anywhere, that no amount of money could change how I feel about you. I reached for Ryan's hand then, squeezing it tightly. His love had been tested in the cruelest way, and he had stood firm. But the hurt lingered. I could see it in the way his shoulders slumped, the way his eyes darkened when he recounted every word my father had thrown at him. Later that night, I paced our tiny apartment, unable to shake the weight of it. Every part of me burned with anger. I wanted to scream at my father, to ask him how he could justify such cruelty. But I also felt something else. Something colder. A realization that whatever lingering hope I had of earning his respect was gone. Ryan sat quietly on the couch, watching me. "You don't have to do anything," he said, though we both knew that wasn't true. "I didn't want to tell you. I didn't want to be the reason You're not the reason," I interrupted, my voice trembling. "He is!" I could still hear the disbelief in Ryan's voice when he recalled the way my father had smirked, like the outcome was inevitable, as though Ryan refusing the money was just a minor setback. That confidence, that infuriating, entitled certainty, that's what haunted me. My father thought he could control me, that he could dismantle the life I was building simply because it didn't align with his version of success. He thought he could manipulate my happiness, but he was wrong. I knew what I had to do, not just for Ryan, but for myself. The next day, I sat in my car outside my parents' house, my hands trembling against the steering wheel. I had rehearsed what I would say over and over again, but now, as I stared at the looming white columns of the estate, every word fled from my mind. I pictured my father's face, his voice laced with that practiced calm he used whenever he wanted to remind me how little I knew. And for a moment, the fear crept in. But then I remembered Ryan, the way he had stood his ground, the way he had believed in us, even when it would have been easier to walk away. I wasn't just confronting my father for what he'd done. I was confronting the part of me that had spent years seeking his approval. When the door opened and my father greeted me with that same self-assured expression, I felt something shift. The fear was still there, but it no longer held me captive. "I know what you did," I said, my voice steady. "And I'm done." He blinked, momentarily thrown. "Emily!" "No," I cut him off. "You think money can fix everything, that you can manipulate people like pieces on a chessboard, but you can't buy Ryan, and you sure as hell can't buy me." I saw it then, the brief flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. He wasn't used to losing, but this time he had. "I love him," I continued, the words falling like steel. "And I choose him. Not your money, not your approval. Him." The silence that followed was deafening. My father opened his mouth as if to argue, but I didn't give him the chance. I turned and walked away, the weight lifting with every step. I didn't look back, because for the first time in my life, I didn't need to. I stood outside my parents' house, the grand brick facade glaring back at me like it always had. The ivy climbing up the walls was perfectly manicured, the hydrangeas blooming in shades of blue and white. Everything about it exuded control, from the pristine landscaping to the gleaming brass knocker on the oversized door. But inside that house, control had become something far uglier, something I could no longer ignore. I wasn't sure how long I had been standing there, but the weight in my chest had been building since the moment Ryan told me about my father's offer. I could still hear his voice, trembling with disbelief as he recounted the way my father had calmly slid a check across the table like it was a simple business transaction. My father thought he could pay Ryan to disappear, and worse, he thought I'd never find out. But I had. I rang the doorbell, the chime echoing through the house. The wait was unbearable. Every second that passed, I felt my anger tightening its grip around me. When the door finally opened, it was my mother who greeted me, dressed in a soft beige sweater, her pearl earrings catching the light. She smiled. That familiar, tight-lipped smile she always used when something was about to be swept under the rug. "Emily, what a surprise!" Her voice was light, but I could see the tension in her eyes. She already knew. "I need to talk to both of you," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "Is Dad home?" She hesitated, her fingers brushing the doorframe. "He's in his study. But, sweetheart, what's wrong?" I didn't answer. I pushed past her, the smell of polished wood and lavender lingering in the air. Every framed family photo lining the hallway stared back at me, as if the perfect version of our family could somehow overwrite the truth. My father was exactly where I knew he'd be, seated behind the massive mahogany desk that had always seemed like a throne. He barely glanced up when I entered, his reading glasses perched low on his nose. "Emily," he greeted, his tone steady, rehearsed. "To what do we owe the pleasure?" I clenched my fists at my sides. "I know what you did," his brow furrowed, though I saw no genuine surprise. "And what exactly is it you think I did?" "You offered Ryan money to break up with me." The words came out before I could stop them, shaking with the force of my anger. $10,000, and when he refused, you made it 15. Did you think I wouldn't find out? My mother gasped softly from behind me, though whether it was out of shock or embarrassment I couldn't tell. My father, however, didn't flinch. "Emily," he said, his voice infuriatingly calm, "I was merely looking out for you." "Looking out for me?" I repeated, disbelief crashing over me. "By trying to buy off the man I love? You didn't even try to get to know him. You just assumed he wasn't good enough." "He's not." His voice was blunt, cold. "Ryan has no connections, no family wealth. He works with his hands. That's not the kind of future you deserve." My mother shifted uneasily, her fingers twisting together. "Your father only wanted what's best for you. These relationships, they don't always last. We've seen it before." I laughed bitterly. "What I deserve? You think a future built on empty status and money is better than one built on love? Ryan has supported me, encouraged me, believed in me in ways you never have. And that terrifies you, doesn't it?" My father's jaw tightened. "You're being emotional." "You think this is just about emotions?" I stepped closer, my voice trembling. "This is about respect. You didn't just insult Ryan. You insulted me. You treated me like I was incapable of making my own choices. Like my life is just another one of your investments." My father stood then, towering over me like he always had, his presence demanding control. But for the first time, I didn't shrink beneath it. "I gave Ryan an opportunity," he said coolly. "An opportunity to prove whether he was truly committed to you. Clearly, he passed." "Passed?" My voice cracked. "You think this was a test?" "In a way, yes," he replied. "I needed to know if he was serious. Men like him often are not." I could feel the blood pounding in my ears. "Men like him? You mean men who don't come from money? Men who weren't born into the privileges you take for granted?" My mother's voice broke through, pleading. "Emily, we're your family. We're just trying to protect you." "Protect me from what?" I turned to her, tears burning my eyes. "From happiness? From someone who actually loves me without conditions?" My father's face hardened. "Love isn't enough. One day you'll understand that." "No," I said, my voice steady. "I understand it now. You don't value love. You value control." For a moment, the room fell silent. My father's cold stare never wavered, and my mother's eyes brimmed with unshed tears. But neither of them spoke. They didn't apologize. They didn't try to make it right. And I knew in that moment that they never would. "I'm done," I whispered. "If you can't accept Ryan, then you can't accept me." I turned to leave, my heart pounding. My mother called after me, her voice trembling, but I didn't stop. The door slammed behind me, the sound echoing like a final, irreversible decision. Ryan was waiting for me when I got home. The second I saw him, the tears I had held back came pouring out. He wrapped his arms around me, his steady presence anchoring me. "They're not going to change," I choked out. "I know," he whispered, holding me tighter. "But I'm here, and we'll figure it out, together." And for the first time in a long time, I knew I wasn't alone. My parents may have tried to break us. They may have used their money, their influence, their twisted sense of superiority. But love, real, unwavering love, was something they could never understand. And that's what made us unstoppable. Moving in with Ryan should have felt like a victory. We had chosen each other, defying everything my parents had tried to do. But as I stood in the middle of our cramped one-bedroom apartment, surrounded by boxes that held the only pieces of my old life I could bear to bring, the weight of it all settled in. The walls were thin, the paint chipped in places, and the ancient radiator clanked like it was protesting its own existence. It was nothing like the pristine world I had grown up in, but it was ours. For the first few days, I tried to convince myself that the ache in my chest was just the shock of change. I told myself that this was the freedom I had wanted. No more judgmental glances across my father's dinner table. No more biting remarks dressed up as concern. But even as I unpacked, I couldn't shake the echoes of my mother's voice lingering like a shadow. "This isn't the life we wanted for you." Ryan did his best to make our apartment feel like home. He fixed the leaky faucet in the kitchen, patched up the cracks in the wall, and installed shelves to hold the mismatched mugs we'd scavenged from thrift stores. Every little effort was a reminder that we were building something from the ground up, piece by piece. But love didn't pay rent. And without the financial support my parents had abruptly cut off, we were quickly sinking. I took on more freelance design projects, saying yes to everything, from company logos to wedding invitations. Most nights I worked late, the glow of my laptop screen the only light in our dim apartment. Ryan picked up extra shifts at the repair shop, coming home exhausted and grease-streaked. We barely saw each other, exchanging quick kisses in the doorway as one of us left and the other stumbled in. We called it surviving, but it felt more like treading water. One night, after hours of squinting at my screen, I pushed away from my desk, my back aching. Ryan was already asleep, his arm flung lazily over my side of the bed. I watched him for a moment, his chest rising and falling in the soft rhythm of sleep. He looked so peaceful, but even then, I could see the exhaustion etched into his face, the bags under his eyes, the faint creases that worry had carved into his skin. I hated that this was what we had come to. The fierce, unrelenting pride that had fueled me when I stormed out of my parents' house had started to crack. There were moments I caught myself wondering if I had made a mistake, not because I doubted my love for Ryan, but because I feared what that love had cost us. The breaking point came one afternoon when my bank app flashed a bright red notification. Insufficient funds. I stared at the screen, the number burning into my mind. My final tuition payment was due in less than a week, and I had nothing left. My parents' threats had become a reality. I was on my own, and I was failing. Ryan found me sitting on the floor, the phone still clutched in my trembling hands. Without a word, he sank down beside me, his warmth grounding me. "We'll figure it out," he said softly. "I don't know how." My voice cracked. "I can't even cover my tuition. I don't want you to take on more shifts. You're already—" "We'll find a way," he interrupted, his fingers lacing through mine. "We always do." That night, I applied for emergency financial aid. I combed through every scholarship opportunity I could find, submitting applications, until my fingers ached. I called my freelance clients, begging for early payments. Ryan, despite my protests, picked up a temporary gig on weekends, helping a friend remodel an old garage. It wasn't glamorous. There were nights we ate instant ramen at the small kitchen table, laughing at the absurdity of it all. On good days, Ryan would surprise me with a single flower he'd picked from a sidewalk planter, placing it in an empty glass jar like it was a priceless treasure. And somehow, those small joys made the burden feel lighter, but the cracks still showed. I noticed how Ryan's laughter didn't come as easily, how he winced when he thought I wasn't looking, his shoulders tense with the weight of the world we were carrying. I wanted to shield him from it. I wanted to tell him that I was fine, that I didn't miss the life I had left behind. But that would have been a lie. I missed the certainty, the comfort of knowing that no bill would go unpaid, the security of a future my parents had once paved for me. But I also knew that certainty came with a price, one I was no longer willing to pay. Then, like a fragile thread finally snapping, my body gave in. The constant stress, the sleepless nights, the unrelenting anxiety, it all came crashing down. One moment, I was standing at the sink, washing the chipped plates from our dinner. The next, the room blurred, and my knees buckled. When I woke up, Ryan was hovering over me, his face pale with fear. "You scared the hell out of me," he whispered, brushing damp strands of hair from my forehead. "I'm sorry," I murmured. "No," he said firmly. "You don't get to apologize. You've been pushing yourself too hard. We both have." I wanted to argue, to insist that I could keep going. But I couldn't. And Ryan, despite his exhaustion, held me like I was the most fragile thing in the world. That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept without nightmares. In the morning, something shifted. I woke up to sunlight streaming through the cracked blinds and Ryan's hand resting in mine. It wasn't a grand epiphany or some dramatic realization. It was quiet, subtle. But I knew then that we would be okay. We made changes. I accepted fewer projects, choosing quality over quantity. Ryan cut back on his hours, finally allowing himself to breathe. And we leaned on each other in a way that felt different, stronger. Every late-night conversation, every exhausted laugh, every whispered reassurance stitched us closer together. When the financial aid finally came through and my tuition was covered, I cried, not just from relief, but from the overwhelming pride that we had made it through. My parents may have stripped away their support, but they hadn't broken us. We were still here, building a life that wasn't defined by their expectations. And, for the first time, I no longer cared if they approved. Ryan and I had chosen each other. And in a world where love was treated like a commodity, that choice was the most powerful thing we had. The silence from my parents was louder than any shouting match we could have had. After that day, when I walked out of their house and chose Ryan over the life they tried to control, I expected some sort of follow-up. A call, a text, even a disapproving letter sealed in my father's pristine handwriting. But there was nothing, just silence. At first, I told myself it was better this way. I didn't have to justify my decisions or endure their endless criticisms. I was free. But as the days turned to weeks and the weeks to months, that freedom began to feel heavier. I hated that I still checked my phone, hoping for something, anything, that showed they cared enough to reach out. But the screen remained empty. Even my mother, who had always been the more delicate presence between the two of them, didn't send so much as a strained apology. It wasn't until Rose, my younger sister, called that I heard anything from their side. She was the only one who still spoke to me, quietly, carefully, as though afraid that even a simple phone call would shatter whatever fragile truce remained in our fractured family. "Mom's been crying a lot," she whispered one evening, her voice laced with worry. "She doesn't say much, but I can tell. She misses you." I wanted to believe that. I wanted to picture my mother sitting in the sunlit corner of the living room, clutching her teacup and regretting what she'd done. But then I thought of my father, his unflinching stare, his unwavering certainty. Regret was a luxury he would never allow himself. They could call, I replied, the bitterness slipping through. They know where I am, Rose sighed. I know, but they're stubborn, especially Dad. That was the understatement of the century. Richard Whitmore wasn't just stubborn, he was immovable. In his mind, admitting fault was akin to surrender, and people like him didn't surrender. The call ended, but the words stayed with me. I didn't tell Ryan about it. He had enough to worry about without the added weight of my family drama. Things between us had finally found a rhythm. We weren't just surviving anymore. We were building. I'd secured more stable freelance work, and Ryan was settling into his expanded role at the repair shop. Even in our tiny, cluttered apartment, I felt more at peace than I ever had in the polished perfection of my parents' house. But peace has a way of unraveling when you least expect it. It happened on a Sunday, the kind of slow morning where the air smelled like freshly brewed coffee and sunlight trickled through the slats in the blinds. Ryan had gone out to grab pastries from the bakery down the street. A small, comforting tradition we'd started to mark the end of each exhausting week. I was still in my pajamas, sipping from my favorite mug when the knock came. It wasn't tentative. It was deliberate. My chest tightened. I wasn't expecting anyone. Maybe it was a neighbor or someone dropping off a misplaced package. But when I opened the door, the sight that met me nearly took the air from my lungs. My mother stood on the doorstep. She looked different. Or maybe it was just the strangeness of seeing her here, outside the carefully curated environment she had built. Her blonde hair was neatly styled, but there were new lines around her eyes, traces of something she'd never let show before. She clutched the strap of her leather handbag like it was the only thing anchoring her. "Emily," she said softly. For a moment, all I could do was stare. Part of me wanted to slam the door and protect the fragile world I'd created. But the other part, the daughter who still longed for even a sliver of her mother's approval, couldn't move. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice colder than I intended. "I needed to see you." She paused, her eyes flickering toward the doorframe like she wasn't sure she'd be welcomed inside. "Please." Against my better judgment, I stepped aside. The apartment seemed even smaller with her presence filling it. I watched as her gaze swept over the space, the uneven stack of books, the chipped coffee table, the half-open curtain revealing the bustling street below. It was a world she had never imagined for me. "Would you like some coffee?" I offered stiffly. She nodded, and I busied myself in the kitchen, trying to calm the storm brewing inside me. The kettle hummed, the silence growing unbearable. "I'm sorry," she finally said, her voice breaking the tension. "I should have come sooner." I didn't answer. I poured the coffee, the rich scent mingling with the bitterness in my chest. When I handed her the mug, she held it tightly, as though the warmth might steady her. "I miss you," she continued, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "And I know I should have fought harder. Your father made his choices," I cut in. "And so did you." Her face crumpled. "I was afraid. He's always been so certain, so convincing. But I should have stood up for you. For Ryan." The mention of his name felt like a jolt. "You didn't just stand by, Mom. You let him believe he was right. You let him think that money could fix everything." She flinched. "I know, and I'll never forgive myself for that." For the first time, the perfect mask she had always worn slipped away. In its place was something raw, human. She wasn't the composed socialite who hosted elaborate charity galas or maintained an air of effortless grace. She was a mother who had lost her daughter. And maybe, just maybe, she was starting to realize what that truly meant. "I don't know if I can forgive you," I admitted, my voice trembling. "But I'm tired of carrying all this anger." She nodded, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. I understand. We sat like that for a while, the silence no longer unbearable. It wasn't a resolution. It wasn't the moment where everything was fixed. But it was something. A beginning. When Ryan returned, the tension in the room shifted. My mother stood awkwardly, brushing invisible lint from her sleeve. She met his eyes, and for the first time, there was no judgment, only regret. I hope. She hesitated. I hope one day we can find our way back to each other. Ryan nodded, though he said nothing. I didn't expect him to. This wasn't his battle. It was mine. After she left, I sank into Ryan's arms, the weight of the morning pressing against me. He didn't ask what was said. He didn't need to. She came, I whispered. I know, he murmured. How do you feel? I didn't know. But for the first time, I was willing to find out. Graduation day arrived with an unsettling weight. I should have been excited, relieved even. After months of sleepless nights and endless freelance projects, just to scrape by, I had done it. I had earned my degree without a single cent from my parents. But as I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the stiff black cap over my curls, all I could think about was the empty space that lingered behind the celebration. Ryan was there, of course. He was my steady presence, always reminding me of how far I'd come. His smile that morning was full of pride, though I knew he could see the shadows in my eyes. My mother had sent a polite text earlier that week, congratulating me. It was distant, like she wasn't sure how much of herself she was allowed to offer. My father? Nothing. Not a word. I told myself I was fine with that. I had stopped expecting anything from him long ago, but still, the absence gnawed at me. When we arrived at the campus, the air buzzed with excitement. Families clustered together, clutching bouquets and posing for photos. Laughter echoed across the green lawns, graduates wrapped in proud embraces. I tried not to think about how different it would have been if my parents had been there. My father standing stoic, pretending not to get emotional. My mother fussing over the fit of my gown, smiling for the perfect picture. But that wasn't my reality. Ryan squeezed my hand as we made our way toward the auditorium. You did this, he whispered. No one can take that from you. His words anchored me. The ceremony was a blur of speeches and applause. I smiled when my name was called, felt the weight of the diploma in my hands, and for a brief moment, I let the pride sink in. I had done it. Not because of my family's wealth, but because I refused to let their absence define me. Afterward, Ryan's mom, Sharon, was the first to pull me into a tight hug. She had become something of a second mother to me, offering warmth and kindness without condition. Her tears weren't laced with regret. They were the tears of someone who had watched me fight for every step and come out on the other side. I'm so proud of you, she whispered, brushing a stray curl from my face. Thank you, I murmured, blinking back my own tears. We went to a small cafe to celebrate. No grand event, no overpriced restaurant with white tablecloths. Just a corner table, coffee cups warming our hands, and the people who mattered most. Ryan's laughter rumbled softly as he told stories about my late-night study sessions, the way I mumbled design concepts in my sleep. I laughed too, the tension slowly unraveling. But then, just as the conversation shifted, my phone buzzed. I almost ignored it. But when I saw my mother's name flash across the screen, my heart skipped. She wanted to meet, not at the house, just a cafe, neutral ground. She didn't say why, only that she wanted to talk. I could have said no. Part of me wanted to. But another part, the one that still longed for some semblance of reconciliation, wouldn't let me. Ryan didn't hesitate when I told him. I'll come with you if you want, he offered. I shook my head. I need to do this alone. The next morning, I arrived early. The cafe was quiet, the hum of the espresso machine the only sound. I chose a table by the window, watching the world rush past outside. And then she arrived. My mother looked different. There was no perfectly coordinated outfit, no pristine makeup masking the strain on her face. She was just human. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she sat down, clasping her hands tightly in her lap. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, the familiar ache pressing against my chest. "Why now?" she exhaled shakily. "Because I couldn't stand the thought of losing you forever." Her words lingered, but I didn't respond. I needed more than vague sentiment. "I know I failed you," she continued, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "I stood by when your father did things I knew were wrong. I watched him try to control you, and I convinced myself that silence was the easier choice." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "And what about now? Do you still think he was right?" Her face twisted with pain. "No, I don't. I see what that did to you, what it did to us." The sincerity in her voice cracked something inside me. I wanted to stay angry, to remind her of every moment I had spent wondering why my own parents couldn't choose me over their pride. But I also saw the guilt in her eyes, the regret, and maybe that was enough. "I don't know how to fix this," she said, her voice trembling. "But I want to try, if you'll let me." For the first time, I didn't feel the crushing need to earn her approval. I wasn't that desperate daughter anymore. I had built a life with Ryan, one full of laughter, struggle, and love. I didn't need her validation. But maybe, just maybe, we could find something new. Not the relationship we once had, but something real. "I'm not ready to forget," I said slowly, meeting her gaze. "But I'm willing to see where this goes." She nodded, tears spilling over, and in that moment, I felt lighter. Not because everything was fixed, it wasn't. But because I had let go of the weight I'd been carrying for so long. When I returned home, Ryan was waiting. He didn't ask how it went. He just pulled me close, his arms wrapped securely around me. I sank into his embrace, the steady beat of his heart reminding me of how far we'd come. My father never reached out. Maybe he never would. But that was no longer my burden to bear. I had built a life outside the shadows of his expectations, and for the first time, I felt free. Ryan and I found a new apartment not long after. It wasn't large, but it had a small balcony where we'd drink coffee in the mornings, watching the city wake up. We laughed more, worried less, and slowly I stopped looking over my shoulder for ghosts of the past. When I hung my diploma on the wall, I didn't see it as proof of defiance. I saw it as a symbol of resilience, a reminder that I had chosen my own path, and I wouldn't change a single step of it. Looking back on everything that happened, I realize how much I've changed. I walked away from the version of myself that sought constant approval, the one who believed that love had to come with acceptance from everyone else. My father's disapproval, my mother's silence, and the pain of losing what I thought was my family's unconditional support shattered the illusion I had grown up with. But through that destruction, I found something far more valuable: my own voice. Ryan was my anchor through it all. He never asked me to choose between him and my family. He would have stepped aside if I had let him, sacrificing his own happiness for mine. But I knew then what I know now. Love isn't about ultimatums or control. It's about choosing each other, even when the world tries to tear you apart. The strength of our relationship wasn't measured in wealth or status, but in the moments we held on when everything else told us to let go. For so long, I believed that my parents' approval was a reflection of my worth. Every accomplishment, Every milestone was carefully polished and presented in hopes of earning their validation. When they cut me off, I felt stripped of my identity. I wasn't their golden daughter anymore. I was just a girl in a small, creaky apartment, piecing together a life without the safety net I had always relied on. But what I thought was a punishment turned out to be my greatest liberation. I learned how to stand on my own. I pushed through late nights and empty bank accounts, not because I had no choice, but because I refused to give up. There was a pride in that, in knowing that every dollar I earned, every project I completed, was a testament to my own resilience. And Ryan was right there with me, not as a savior, but as a partner. We struggled together, laughed together, and celebrated even the smallest victories. Those moments were ours, untainted by the weight of expectations. My mother's visit reopened wounds I thought I had sealed. Seeing her break down and admit her regrets was something I never imagined. She had always been the mediator, the one who smoothed over my father's sharp edges. But in her apology, I saw a different version of her. A mother who mourned the loss of her daughter's trust. Her words didn't erase the past, but they gave me permission to let go of the bitterness I had clung to. Forgiveness isn't a single act. It's a choice I make every day, to stop replaying the hurt, to release the anger that served no purpose but to keep me chained to the past. My father may never offer the apology I once longed for, and I've accepted that. His inability to see my worth doesn't diminish it. I am not defined by his disappointment. I am defined by the life I've built, the love I've nurtured, and the person I've become. And that's the lesson I want to leave with you. We don't get to choose the family we're born into. Sometimes, the people who are supposed to love us unconditionally are the ones who hurt us the most. But we do get to choose how we respond. We get to decide whether we'll allow their judgment to shape our future, or if we'll step into the unknown and create a life that's ours. If you've ever felt like you weren't enough, not successful enough, not wealthy enough, not obedient enough, I hope you remember this story. You are not defined by the expectations others place on you. Your worth isn't tied to a paycheck or a last name. It's in the courage to walk away from what no longer serves you, even when it's terrifying. Maybe your version of walking away won't involve leaving a relationship or severing family ties. Maybe it's as simple as saying no to something that doesn't align with your values, or standing up for yourself in the face of criticism. Whatever it is, know that your happiness is worth the fight. And when you find the people who stand by, you who celebrate your victories without resentment and catch you when you fall, hold on to them. Those are your people. Family isn't always the one you're born into. Sometimes it's the one you choose. Ryan and I are still building our life together. The apartment may be a little bigger now, and the bills aren't as daunting, but the laughter remains the same. My mother and I are slowly repairing what was broken. We don't pretend the past didn't happen, but we've both chosen to move forward. And my father. He stays in his world of wealth and influence, and I no longer feel the need to chase after the approval he'll never give. That's his burden, not mine. So if you're standing at your own crossroads, wondering if you have the strength to take the harder path, you do. It won't be easy. Some days, the doubt will scream louder than the belief in yourself. But every step you take toward a life that feels true to you will be worth it. And one day, you'll look back and realize that the people who tried to break you only made you stronger. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, I'd be honored if you subscribe to the channel. Your support means the world to me, and it's what allows us to keep sharing stories that inspire, heal, and remind us all that we're not alone. Let's continue this journey together. And remember, your story is just beginning.